All right, for this video, I wanted to talk about the IRS Revenue Ruling 99.5. So 99.5 was released over 20 years ago, and it was designed to try to provide some clarity as to what happens when you have LLCs moving from single to multi-member and then back the other way. So, for example, I get a lot of clients that they're a single-member LLC, so it's a disregarded entity. It's not an S corp, not a C corp, and then they want to bring in a business partner, so they add that person to the LLC. Well, immediately upon doing that, you automatically convert the entity from a disregarded entity to a partnership. And the same applies in the reverse, right? So if you have a multi-member LLC that's a partnership, and then let's say you have three guys in there, two of them leave. As soon as the two persons leave and it's now just one owner, now it reverts from partnership to disregarded single member LLC. So 99.5 provided some clarity as to what the steps were and what the tax implications were for each type of party and under each scenario. So they give us two fact patterns. I got them listed out here, so we'll talk about these a bit. So example fact pattern 1, we have B, who's not related to A, actually purchases 50% of A's ownership interest in the LLC. Right, so A has an LLC, and he goes to B, and then B just talks to A and says, hey, I'm not going to contribute cash to the LLC in exchange for an interest. I just want to buy half of your units. So A sells B 50% of his units for $5,000. And so what happens? Well, the purchase of the LLC units by B from A is treated as a sale of the underlying assets for tax purposes. So even though legally the contract might say that, well, A is selling 50 units, LLC units to B, that's fine from a legal perspective. But from a tax perspective, what's happening, because that's an LLC that's a disregarded entity, it's treated as a deemed sale of those underlying assets, or a sale of each piece of those underlying assets, right? So A recognizes a gain or loss on the deemed sale of 50% of each of those assets. B's basis in the partnership units is what he paid for it, right? So he paid A $5,000, so that's his beginning basis in the LLC units. And then A's basis in the LLC is equal to 50% of his share of the assets, right? So whatever it was to begin with. So again, that's an automatic conversion, right? As soon as you become a partner, either through a purchase of the units or a contribution to capital, automatically becomes a partnership. And then these are the tax impacts for B and A as part of that transaction. Now, let's look at example fact pattern 2. So we have B here, again, not related to A, and that's important because if these are related parties or they're affiliated in a certain way, there are special rules that apply. So in this case, what they wanted to do is make it very clear in this fact pattern that they are not related parties. So again, we have B, not related to A, contributes $10,000 to the LLC in exchange for a 50% ownership interest. So notice the subtle difference here. B is not buying the units directly from A, right? So there's no contract to purchase 50% of the LLC units directly from A. What B is doing instead is he is contributing the cash directly to the LLC, directly to the entity itself, and in exchange, the operating agreement is being amended to grant B 50% of the membership interests in the LLC. Okay. Now, once this happens, again, it's an automatic conversion, right? So the entity converts from a disregarded entity to a multi-member LLC that's now a partnership. And so it also outlines again for us here what are the tax implications of that piece. Okay, so now B's contribution to cash in exchange for the ownership interest is a deemed contribution by A contributing all the assets of the LLC to the partnership in exchange for the interest. So B puts the money in, he gets an interest back, and then as part of that initial step as well, A is treated as contributing everything he has to the partnership, even though it's already in there, right? Remember, these assets are already in the entity, but for tax purposes, it's treated as if A is recontributing all those assets in exchange for a 50% ownership interest. Now, under this transaction, no gain or loss is recognized by either party, right? B's basis in the partnership is the cash he put in, right? So he had $10,000 in cash, put that in. That's his beginning basis. That's his beginning capital account. And then for A, his basis is the adjusted basis of the assets that he is deemed to have contributed. Okay, so so I would recommend giving 99.5, more complete read. It's not that long of a revenue ruling, but these are the main points in there that I just wanted to cover. And again, this is a 20-year-old revenue ruling, but it's still very helpful to try to help new business owners understand at a high level what's going on here if you add a new partner or member to your LLC. So if you're a single member LLC out there and you're a disregarded entity, so right now, you're just reporting everything on your Schedule C, all right? So you file your 1040, Schedule C, income and expenses, that's it. But then you meet somebody and you want to partner up with them and you're not going to form a new entity, you're going to use the existing one. Depending on how you bring that owner in will determine the tax implications, but also mechanically what's going on as illustrated by these two examples. So I always recommend speaking with a lawyer and a tax advisor before you do anything because, again, these examples are very, very simple. There are nuanced rules, can get more complicated, certainly. So it's always good to talk with somebody that's familiar in this space and could provide a little more color on what you should be doing, what steps should you be taking, what you should be avoiding, and what is the best for not just the entity itself, but all the parties that are going to be involved. So all right, so that covers it for this video. Hope that was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, leave me a comment below. As you know, I'm always happy to help and try to answer as many comments as I can. And I look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Thank you.